So today we're doing 3-2, which is angles formed by parallel lines and transversals. So you're going to notice a lot of the same angle names, but we are going to have parallel lines. So when you have parallel lines that are cut by a transversal, the angle pairs formed are either congruent or supplementary. So this is when you have, again, parallel lines. That's important. So if they're congruent, remember that means that they are equal measure. Okay? If they are congruent, they have equal measure. If they're supplementary, then, Sam, what does that mean?
They equal up to
Yeah, so the sum of those angles is going to be 180. So congruent or supplementary. In fact, most of them are congruent. There's only one pair that's going to be supplementary. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So the first postulate is the corresponding angles postulate. So that postulate says if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then corresponding angles are congruent. Now, in order for them to be congruent, you have to have two parallel lines cut by a transversal. Okay, so corresponding angles are congruent. All right, so then let's look at our example. Let's find all the pairs of congruent angles that are congruent by the corresponding angle postulate. So angle 1, Xavier, what's angle 1 going to be congruent to by the corresponding angles postulate? Nope, those are going to be alternate exterior angles. So remember, corresponding are going to be the same position.
Oh, 3.
Yeah, so angle 1 would be congruent to angle 3. Okay, Baron, what about angle 2? What's angle 2 going to be congruent to?
4.
Yeah. Aiden, what's angle 5 going to be congruent to?
7.
Yep. And then Raleigh, what's the last pair?
6 and 8.
Yep. So all of those are congruent by the corresponding angles postulate. Okay, and then it says, given the following drawing, find the measure of QRS. So this is how we can use the postulate to find the value of different things in a diagram. So they give us X. Notice here, see how those are marked parallel? Right here, here's your parallel symbol. If they're marked parallel, that's when you know you have corresponding angles. And corresponding angles, what's the relationship? They're congruent. Okay, so we have angle X. And then Caitlin, do we have a corresponding angle to angle X?
180.
Yep, those two are corresponding, right? So the same position in the same transversal. So we know that X is equal to 118 degrees. What we're trying to find is the measure of QRS. So what we're trying to find is this angle right here. Can you maybe tell me what we know about another relationship? Yeah, Hope. Yeah, good. Okay, and why? What's their relationship?
It's supplementary.
And how do you know that? How do you know they're supplementary?
Because it makes a line.
Exactly. Yep. So together they're going to make a line, and we call those a linear pair. So the measure of angle X plus the measure of angle QRS is going to equal 180 degrees. And if we were writing that out as a proof, which we are going to have proofs with these, our reason that we know those are equal is that they're a linear pair. So then, yep, if we know the measure of x is 118 degrees, 118 plus the measure of QRS would equal 180. Do you guys know what reason that would be? Substitution, it'd be substitution. And then your next step would be the measure of QRS would equal what? How would you solve this for the measure of QRS? Subtraction. You subtract both sides. So if we subtract 118 from both sides, what do we get? 72. 62. That's okay. Okay, and then, so again, that would be the subtraction property. Okay, so I'm just trying to get you to think about those proofs. Really, you could just do 180 minus 118 and you'd find that it was 62. Okay, now we're going to talk about the next theorem. What's the difference between a postulate and a theorem? Do you guys remember?
Postulates are true, believed to be true all the time.
Yep.
It's like kind of true something.
The postulates are going to be something that we accept to be true without proof. Theorems, we would have to prove them to be true. Okay, so theorems are still true all the time. It's just you have to prove them, where a postulate is just accepted as true without proof. Okay, so the next one is the alternate interior angles theorem. And again, look how this starts. If two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pairs of, and let's highlight alternate interior angles. What do you think those are? They are congruent. So remember, they're either congruent or supplementary. So those are going to be congruent. Okay, so angle 1 is going to be congruent to what angle? Angle 3. Those are alternate interior. Tanner, what's the other pair of alternate interior? So 1 and 3 and what else? 2 and 4. Those are alternate interior. Okay, notice like with alternate interior, it kind of makes a Z or like a backward Z. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
So like if I were to make your Z here, see how those would be the inners of the Z? Or if I did a backward Z, that would be your 2 and your 4. Okay, and then theorem 323 is the alternate exterior angles theorem. And again, it starts if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then two pairs of alternate exterior angles are congruent. Okay, so see if you can name the two pairs of angles that are congruent. Okay, so Madison J, give me two pairs of alternate exterior angles that are congruent.
7 and 5.
No. Oh, Madison J's. Go ahead, sorry, Madison.
6 and 8.
Okay, and what's the other one?
7 and 5.
Yeah, so 6 is congruent to 8. Perfect. All right, let's flip it over. This is the last type. All right, so same side interior. then the two parallel lines are cut by a transversal. Actually gonna highlight this one with a different color. Why do you think I'm gonna do that? That's right, it's not congruent. So then two pairs of same side interior angles are, what are these gonna be? Yes. Okay, so these are gonna be supplementary. Okay, so we aren't gonna say that they're congruent. We would say angle 1 and angle 4 are supplementary. Okay, or we would say the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 4 equals 180 degrees. Alright, so you can do the same thing with the second pair. Somebody's gonna have to scare you back there. Alright, so our next example, we're going to find each angle measure. Okay, we're also, if you can tell me why, that would be great. Okay, so I want you to try to work on the first one, the measure of ECF. Sound like you and I got it. Scares me. Okay, then tell me that's why. Then tell me that's why. Okay, Ella, what are you thinking about for the measure of ECF?
Would it be 70?
It is. Can you tell me why?
Because GBC is equivalent to ECF.
Okay, good. So you said GBC, angle GBC is congruent to ECF by what?
Supplementary.
Well, they're not supplementary because you told me that they're equal, right? Yeah, so
Like
this,
congruent.
they're congruent, but what type of angles are they? So how do you know they're congruent? What's their relationship? How did you know they were congruent then?
I don't know what this one calls.
Okay, well let's use our first page then. So they're either going to be corresponding, alternate interior, or alternate exterior.
Correspond.
Okay, yep, so they're corresponding. So these are congruent by the corresponding angles postulate. Okay, and I am going to add a part C in there too, okay? For B, it says the measure of DCE. The measure of DCE. So here is DCE. Okay, Brandon, do you have any thoughts on how I can find what that measure is?
You said equal to ABC.
Okay, so we know that those are congruent, right? We know that we know that 5x is gonna equal 4x minus 22, and we could solve that. Okay, and yeah, let's do that. So there's two different ways you can do that. So you can say, okay, we know that 5x is going to equal 4x plus 22, because those are what kind of angles? Corresponding. Okay, so if you subtract 4x from both sides, you'll get x equals 22. Is that the measure of DCE, 22? No, what do we have to do?
Multiply by 5.
Okay, so then we plug it back in. So the measure of DCE is equal to 5x, so 5 times 22, which would be what?
110. You did all that work for nothing.
Why don't you just do 185 times 2?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, there's another way. So yeah, Riley, what did you do?
Like 70.
Okay, yeah, we already found this was 70, right? So then what could you do?
That's the same thing.
Well, what do you know about these two?
They're supplementary to equal 180
Okay, and how do you know they're supplementary?
because
They're adjacent and they form a linear pair. Okay, so you could also do that. So if you subtracted 70, you get 5x equals 110. And really, look, 5x equals 110. So isn't 110 going to be this? Yeah, you could also solve for x. So 5x equals 110, that would be 110 degrees. Okay, so there is more than one way to solve, so that's fine. So you do whatever works for you, whatever you notice first. And then we are going to do part C. And we're just going to put it here. Okay, and C is going to be find the value of x, which really we've already done, right? If you're finding the value of x, if you didn't already set this up for the first one, I wanted to make sure you knew how to do that. So 5x would be equal to 4x plus 22. So x would equal 22. Okay, you could also set it up this way, and you would just divide both sides by what? If 5x equals 110, divide both sides by 5, x would be 22. Okay, so I want you to try the next example. Okay, so make sure you tell me the theorem, okay? Alright, so Tina, what'd you do for the first one?
I did the alternate exterior angles.
Perfect, and what did you get?
75.
Okay, so this is going to be 75 degrees, and then we can say angle EDG is congruent to FBC by the alternate exterior angles theorem. Okay, please write that down, that is why. Because like I said, we are going to get into proofs about these. Okay, and then the second one, you are finding BDG. Jana, tell me how you thought about this one.
So for BDG, since we already
Okay, good. So we knew that the measure of EDG and the measure of BDG had to be 180 because they're what? Well, yeah, but why are they supplementary? They form a linear pair, right? Okay, so you said you already knew this was 75. So if you substituted 75 in, then you could just go ahead and you could solve, which you would just subtract 75 from both sides. And the measure of BDG would be 105. Okay, I'm going to add a couple more of those in for you. You're welcome. So C, there's A, there's B. For C, I want you to find the measure of ABD. And for D, I want you to find the value of X. All right, Tony, what are you thinking about for the measure of ABD?
I think that's 75.
Can you tell me how you know? You are correct.
I know because it's on the opposite side of FBC.
Okay, and what's the relationship between those? Angle ABD and FBC are what? What's the relationship? No. No, they're not. Because ABD is right here, right? What are these angles called? Vertical angles. So ABD and FBC are vertical angles. How else could you think of it? So you're finding ABD, right? Which is right here. Did we find anything else that has a relationship with them? Like, yeah, so EDG and those two would be corresponding. Yeah, you could absolutely do that too. Okay, then we have to find the value of X. So there's not one equation you have to set up for this. Yeah, Brandon, what did you do?
I did x minus 30 equal to 2x minus 1.
Okay, so you could set x minus 30 is equal to 2x minus 135 because those are corresponding angles. Or you could also do what?
Set x minus 30 equal to 75.
Okay, yep. Or I would actually, or you could do 2x minus 135 equal to 75 because those are vertical angles. Okay, so either way, you want to get all your x's on one side. So this would be negative x. I'd add 30 over. I would get negative 105. So positive x would equal positive 105. Right? And then if you solve this way, you would get 2x equals 210. Divide both sides by 2. X would be 105 degrees. So that means that BDG would be equal to what?
X.
X. Okay. All right. So for your homework tonight, this is 3.2, which is on page 158. You're going to do 1 through 23, but you can skip number 5 and 12. Okay, so you can skip 5 and 12. We are gonna do some of our presentations today. Okay, so you can pack up and give your full attention to the presenters today.